You can absolutely conquer whatever it is you choose to confront. In this show, we talk PTG, we listen and believe, we support and empower. Whether you have experienced domestic violence personally or not, someone you know has. Your circle of family, friends, acquaintances, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men will experience domestic violence at some point in their life. Physical abuse is only one of the many forms of domestic violence. Survivors also report experience of verbal, emotional, spiritual, sexual, financial, electronic, and so much more. Domestic violence does not discriminate. It can leave you traumatized and devastated, mentally, emotionally, financially. You can find yourself homeless, jobless, helpless. The list can go on. There's blankets of insecurities, triggers, doubts, and other residual effects that become hurdles that impact our life as we do our best to move on. Many people associate butterflies with a sense of freedom. We've been taught along the way to focus on the transformation that takes place inside of the cocoon. I invite you to take a moment to conceptualize all the odds the caterpillar was up against and needed to defeat in order to get to a safe place, to build its cocoon and actually experience the transformation. My name is A. Garcia. I am a mother and survivor of a double attempted homicide. Now, I'm dedicating my life to take yours to the next level by experiencing post-traumatic growth to begin a new chapter in your life. Let's get started on this journey together. Confronting Domestic Violence is a 501c3. All contributions, volunteers, and sponsorships are welcomed. It takes a community to make a difference. Nobody should suffer alone. Please scan the QR code.
Hey, Garcia here, and thank you for tuning in. What we cover is not intended to ignite any triggers. For what you want to conquer, you must confront. Welcome to Confronting Domestic Violence. Today, I have Sybil with me, and we're going to talk about her journey to how she got to where she is in life. Statistics show that 1 out of 3 women have been exposed to or experienced a form of domestic violence. Yet, Sybil is one that has not. So we are going to dive right in to see how she got into this field of work and where her passion comes from. So welcome, Sybil. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here with you all today.
So we have had some background conversation. I've been a guest on your show. The collaboration when people find like-minded individuals for the same passion to help others and talk about mental health and emotional healing, I think it's just a beautiful thing because we're building the community and reaching out to so many other people. Our stories and our passion can truly change or save somebody's life. So it is such an honor to have you here, and I'll just let you start wherever you feel comfortable.
Yeah, so people do ask me all the time, why am I so passionate about working with survivors and going above and beyond, because it is a passion. So I work with legislation and I have a podcast and I have a community. And so my story is a little bit different than a lot of other professionals advocating in this space. And yeah, I am a trained mental health therapist. I was trained in a couples and family program. I got about this much training on domestic violence, big old goose egg, as I went through my graduate program to be a couples and family therapist, which is really scary. I think I had 30 minutes in one class that basically my takeaway, so there could have been more to it, but my takeaway was, if there's domestic violence, don't do couples work. That was it. That's what I remember. And so it was not even almost on my radar when I started my profession in mental health, because it was not something I knew growing up, and it was not anything I knew in my ecology as a young adult. And I really just wanted to work with kids. I just wanted to work with kids. That's why I went into do this, to work with families. And what I found was, in every work environment I was in. So I've worked in a hospital setting, I've worked at an agency, and now I run a small group private practice. But early on, there was a dynamic with some of my child clients that I couldn't put my finger on. I didn't understand like the system that they were living in just by what I saw in the therapy room with my kids. But there was something wrong and I didn't know what it was. And now I know it was domestic violence in the home.
Wow.
Because
Okay.
these kids aren't coming in telling me. They very well know this is a secret. They're not supposed to tell, or they think this is normal. This is a normal thing that every family goes through. Or if they know it's not normal, again, they know it's a secret and they don't say anything. And so within all of these different work environments, I didn't really have supervision or kind of people further along in the field than me that knew a whole lot about it either. And so I just had to learn from my clients. I had to learn as like from any little way I could. So reaching out to different advocates and reading and doing all of those things. And the reason I became really passionate about it, first I got deemed, which is so weird, by the child protection kind of county, the county in which I work. A lot of the caseworkers deemed me like good at DV. I don't actually know what that means. But so I just started getting a lot of those cases because they would refer them to me because I was good at it. Yeah, I'm like, I still don't even know what that means really. But yeah, so when as a child therapist, I am asked to or subpoenaed to go to family court fairly often because I work with kids within high conflict divorce. And I do the air quotes because I think probably close to 90% of high conflict divorce is actually domestic violence.
Yeah, definitely a form of it because there's so many different forms that fall under it.
Yes.
Ooh.
Yes. And so I would go to court and I would know what I felt like was in the child that I'm working with, their best interests. And that's not how it would shake out in court hardly ever. So it felt like, first of all, why am I here to talk to you as an expert and I'm working with this kid and no one's going to listen to anything I say? Like, what? That's a waste of people's money. But I would see the outcomes and be just so confused that kids were being placed in harm, like continued harm. And so I just had to dig. If I don't understand something, I have to figure it out. I just can't sit with it. I'm like, especially it's around child safety.
I'm so big on that. I just want to take a moment to first just recognize and acknowledge because I know that is hard work when you are dealing with the children, the innocent children that have no choice in the matter, and
Mhm.
you are clear as to what the circumstances and environment is at home. You're going to court to testify or to provide your expertise, and the outcome is so disheartening. Now, I understand that when there's domestic violence and there's no kids involved, it's okay, immediately cut off all ties. Don't go talk, don't do anything. Just change your number, change everything, no contact whatsoever. But as soon as a child is involved, it's find a way. It's the child, like you said, in the best interest of the child. And it's okay, so how and where does that line come in where it's no contact to figure it out just because there's a child involved? Can you break that down based on your exposure and expertise as to maybe helping the rest of us figure that out? Because that is not easy. There's no such thing as just figure it out.
No, no. And it's disparate of if there's a criminal case, no children, orders of protection are immediately in place. Yeah, the focus is get away, no contact, right? Like it's really clear that we
Yes.
know that no contact is the best way to start healing. And yet, if you're in a family court situation where you have children, it's actually you do have to have consistent contact with this person and you need to respond within 24 to 48 hours of their messages.
And all those triggers that are like being imposed on you, especially if your life has been in danger. And especially when you're seeing a child afraid, crying, screaming, fighting not to go, what is the best? There is no best approach. Every situation is different. So it's like, how do you navigate through that? How do you coach your client, or how do you, in your sessions, talk to your children on coping. Because for me personally, Confronting Domestic Violence is a nonprofit organization, and we are all about helping to relocate families who are in a unsafe situation, have a safe place to go to, but not the means to get there for all of these reasons. Get away and figure it out as you go through. But that's on the adult side. When it comes to the children, and I'm so big on post-traumatic growth, PTG, right? But again, in the capacity of an adult understanding. So when you're dealing with children, and please, for all of our listeners, moms, dads who are listening to this, when you know that your child is going through it because you're going through it, how can we help our children not so much understand because they don't have the capacity to understand, but to safeguard, protect, and help them actually cope?
Yeah, it's really hard. And the family court system is hard to understand because there's the image that it really is based on what's in a child's best interest. Most courts, even though the research is there, they are not educated on what is actually in a child's best interest when it comes to domestic violence. There is this belief that children should have fairly equal contact with both parents to thrive. That is for safe parents. If both parents are safe, yep, they should have time with both parents and they will do better. But when one parent isn't safe, that is actually not what the research says should happen. The research basically says that children need to be with safe, secure parents, not someone who's abusive.
And how do you measure safe?
Yes. And so, yeah, there's actually, and it's like it's such a long study, but the Saunders study, and there's a couple other studies, but that one really goes into kind of like the ACE scores, which is Adverse Childhood Events Scale, like those scores and how that affects children and how domestic violence affects children and what the courts should do. And nobody's really listening. So no one's reading that long report. So it is really hard. And I work somewhat in legislation as well. So I have worked with legislators to sponsor bills, and I testify on the House or Senate floor, wherever it is, on this. But that process is slow. It's really slow. So even though in Colorado, we just had a really big win, it's so hard that my families I work with right now, they're like, oh, good. How is that going to affect me? And it may not. It's going to be a couple years before it's starting to make change. So that's really hard. But we actually, as parents, we actually do have a lot of things we can do to support the resiliency of our children, even when they are going to a home and they're not always completely unsafe. Like a lot of people, when we say like an unsafe parent, they think that they're physically abusing them or sexually abusing them. And at times, yes, they are. But they are also the way that someone who's abusive kind of works in their world is going to happen to their children too. So if they use gaslighting and manipulation and entitlement to just work in their world, their children are going to experience that too. So that is also not safe for our kids. But we as kind of protective parents can help with our child's resilience. And I think, and I got this term, and it's like my favorite term from Dr. Cochiola, shared this with me, I think just in a private discussion actually, but she said, we can give them the gift of perspective. And so what I mean by that is your children will feel the difference between a home where there's unconditional love and a home where love always has strings attached. They will be able to physically feel, and their nervous systems will feel the difference. And over time, they will lean towards, and they will start to understand. So they'll lean towards, this is my safe parent and protective parent, and this love feels good, whereas this doesn't feel like love. So I think the number one thing that parents can do is give them that gift. And that actually takes a lot of work on your part, because it takes you doing your work to have the skills to manage your triggers, because your children will trigger you as well. Like,
Oh,
I'm a
yeah.
mama and some of the things, they'll just do something, say something, and they know exactly how to get you all riled up. Like, they just do. And so it's doing your work to be able to stay grounded enough to respond with love, not just to let them walk all over you, right? But to have really compassionate boundaries and compassionate structure, rather than fly off the handle, or rather than turn into a broken crying ball on the floor. Because either going either way, being like extremely angry and authoritative when you're maybe disciplining them, or falling apart and being that hot mess crying, both of those are actually harmful to your child.
They are. And when you see a child trying to take that away from you, that means that they're taking that stress and that anxiety on. They want to absorb it for you and solve your problems. And
Mhm.
although it's so innocent, so loving, that's a big red flag right there. Hold on, this adult stuff is now it's offloading it onto the child. And I can say from my personal experience that that's really hard to do. Control
Yes.
yourself.
Yes.
Whether your child is triggering you or you're just triggered or that emotional mess already without them triggering you. You are responsive or you're reacting instead of responding. And you're absolutely right. If you're yelling and it's for no reason, that is going to affect them. If you're crying and you're just that hot mess, like you're saying, that's showing, I don't want to say a form of weakness, but it's creating this scared feeling with the child because they don't really see you like that. And even if you're not crying, if you're not yelling, if you're not triggered, talking about the other parent, sharing your
Mhm.
opinion about them, giving them details that are not for children to even hear is
Yeah.
another way to, I believe, protect. And for me personally, I found ways to change our environment so that I wouldn't fall into that crying person or that triggered person. Yes, kids will trigger you intentionally, but they can also trigger you unintentionally, just doing something
Yes.
that the other parent it was doing or just picking up traits, right? So I would do things like waste a lot of time doing stuff outside the house. I will like, let's go to Target, whatever. It's just to get out of the environment. So you have to hold your composure. And if they're small enough to put them in the cart, go down the toy section, put some toys in the cart. You're not going to buy it or you are, whatever, but keep them entertained so that you can be in your thoughts until you're able to compose yourself in front of the child in at home because home is supposed to be your safe space, right?
Yeah.
Going to the movies or movie hopping or just different things to do outside of the home that forces you to compose yourself and be more, I don't know, correct outside, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And this isn't, there's no perfection ever.
Right.
You're going
No.
to totally botch it at some point. And the difference, another area of showing that difference in perspective and the contrast is, I will repair this with you. Your ex-partner is likely not, because they're almost unable to take accountability for anything that they have done to harm someone else. They did wrong. They're not going to take accountability. And you get to model that for your children. And
Yes.
so that's just another area of, if I've come home, it's just been like a rough day at work or whatever, and I am just really quick to yell or just stomping around, or I'm annoyed really quickly, I have no patience. I get to then later say, wow, like my response to you wasn't nice, it wasn't kind, and you didn't even do anything wrong. Like, mom had a rough day from work and I took that out on you. I am so sorry. And I get to have that statement. Sometimes they're like, yeah, whatever, but they're listening. They're
That's right.
listening.
So you're feeding them emotional intelligence by doing that.
So you're
And
modeling good behaviors
yes,
for them, right? And
yes.
then you're showing them that I can mess up and I can take accountability, but then also we're showing them that you are worth it for me to repair this with you. Like our relationship is worth it enough. And
That's
so
right.
those are areas that you can really focus on with your kids. Also, yes, do not talk poorly about the other parent, especially if they're of the age where they have no filter, because they will go to their other parent's home and say, Mom said, or Dad said, and you're like, and then that's going to just start a whole nother storm, right? That's like a storm you don't need to have. But it
And it,
also, it's harmful for the child to hear those
yes.
things. So, right, each of these things, finding ways to regulate your nervous system, calm yourself down, which is hard. It's a lot of work. You don't do it just right. Everyone's like, okay, take your deep breaths in the moment. But it actually takes you training yourself over time when you're not extremely triggered to do mindfulness and working to calm your nervous system. There's a lot of different ways to do that, so that when you are triggered, you have access to that. It's not something you have to try in this moment. It's no, I do deep breathing or I do mindfulness all the time. And so I'm just going to use that, pull that out as my skill now.
And I would like to talk about that for a second, because there's positive triggers and there's negative triggers. And I always go with the positive trigger as an example first. And that is when you hear your favorite song. You're already moving, you're going through something there. And then the negative trigger, you have a physiological change. It resides somewhere in your body. It's for you to identify where it resides in your body. If you get that lump in your throat, if you feel your face getting hot, if your blood is rushing, if your stomach is turning when you are triggered. And it's at that very moment that you have the highest degree of self-control and empowerment to decide how you want to react or respond to that trigger. And having the situational awareness, who are you dealing with? What environment are you in? What is your intended outcome? I know I'm saying a lot of things, and this is supposed to be like assessed in a few seconds, right? What is it that you want or that you intend to do or intend to have, so that you know how you want to respond or react at that moment? And sometimes it's just retreating. If you can't figure out the right approach at that moment, then come back, retreat and come back, so you have the time to think about it and help mitigate some destruction or pain or having to go back and say, I'm sorry. It's big. I do like to talk about how we emotionally feed our children. I know that mental health is huge, protection is huge, safety is huge, but if we do not include that emotional feeding, that emotional intelligence, it causes that confusion. Like you said earlier, when the parents are talking about the other parents, whether the kid is going back and forth, Mom said this, Dad said that, da, da, da. They're put in the middle right then and there. You're putting them in the middle because they have to
Yes.
develop their own feelings based on their own relationship with that parent. And like you said, they'll know which environment is unconditional, which environment seems to be a little bit tainted. The love may be there, but it's all these things attached to it. And it's a part of that development. So how long or what process? It's hard to ask the question because everybody is different, but it's like, how long should children stay in sessions talking and working through these types of mental and emotional confusion and battlefields within? Because at the end of the day, it goes back to how do you cope with that to stay healthy on all these levels, right? And teenage
Yeah.
years is like the most confusing and rough.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's interesting is the research says that divorce specifically, so this is not specific to domestic violence or anything like that, but divorce is usually the most difficult for elementary age kids, because they very often have memories of being together. And so they have a lot of grief of that, but they don't have the full, like, abstract understanding to understand divorce and to understand the why someone could fall out of love with somebody, or why we can't make this work. So they have a really hard time, and they don't have the same level of emotional intelligence. So that age group is hard within that realm. But the length of time is so hard because there's so many factors. But what I would say is the level of consistent trauma that the kids are in. So again, if they are always having to walk on eggshells, they will likely need support as long as they have to do that.
Okay, that's the fair, very, very fair. I don't see a lot of that support in schools.
No, it's slowly improving, but with the pandemic and things, the need is so much greater than I don't know a single place where there is enough mental health care for our kids. There's
Oh my
just not.
gosh. And since the pandemic, I thought so long and hard about how many children were exposed to the most negative environment with the parents, whether they're together or not, even single parents who just couldn't even handle the pandemic themselves, and how that was dealt with. If you have a high stress job working from home and you have to be the teacher and you have to be the principal and you have to be the chef and you have to be the janitor and you have to, I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yes.
Like I'm laughing, but it's not funny because I was one of them.
Oh, yep. It was rough. It was so rough.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And it hasn't, I don't even know, has it been 1 year, 2 years later? I don't know. It seems like it all blends in and it has affected all of us differently. And I know some kids who are still really struggling just to get back into having a social setting,
Mhm.
social life. Like behind the screen is where a lot of people, I can't even say children, like really just prefer to be. And like we said, the mental health is so important. And with children, it's really hard based on their age and what they were exposed to. And it becomes, I think, what I'm seeing is that it's becoming harder and harder for children to actually express their emotions. And they just don't know how. And even some adults, I can't say I'm great at expressing my emotions, but if we give them the tools to cope, because it's your thoughts that everything else follows. Your emotions follow your thoughts. You think about something, you cry. You think about something, you laugh. It's where you are in your head that the rest of your body and motions follow.
Yeah. And it is when we go to specifically for domestic violence purposes as the protective parent, you have to learn, and this is horrible. Like as a therapist, I'm like, I hate that this is because it's not this ideal healing world, but you have to learn to stomach a lot, because if you notice your child is using the fawning trauma response, which is like appeasing, and they are going to be a people pleaser and they're taking that role with your co-parent or their other parent, this is not healthy. This is not healthy, but it's keeping them safe right now. So from this therapeutic perspective, it's so hard because I'm like, no, this isn't healthy. And this is what keeps them safe in this environment. So we can't change it because
So
they're going to
safety
be
first.
safe. Right. And so
That's right.
when I'm telling parents these things and because they'll bring it up and say, my child, I just really noticed that they will basically stroke their other parent's ego and they're going to people please and they're going to emotionally take care of that parent and all the things. We need to fix that. And it's, oh, yes, we need to fix that. And we don't need to fix that right now because it keeps them safer while they're there. When kids are starting to get older, that 13 plus, then we do get to have some of those conversations of what does this behavior do for you when you're at this parent's house? And they can usually say, I'll be like, what if you reacted this way? And you shared exactly what you think. And they'll be able to say, nope, this parent will get really angry, or they may not talk to me for a couple of days, giving their child the silent treatment, or
Which is a form of abuse.
it is, or they'll be like, if I do this, then I know my dad will help me pay for my athletic,
Another
or
form of
they'll
abuse.
help me pay for my car. And so I have to do it this way. And so it's just like the acknowledging, like, why are you behaving this way? And just being really aware of why we do it.
Yeah.
And giving them that autonomy to start learning, like these relationships where you have to do this don't feel good, but you're doing it for a purpose. Relationships like this, where you can be your true authentic self, feels good. Let's try and have more of those relationships in your life than these relationships in your life. And so kids that, when they're in that older kind of adolescence, they get to, those are fun, sometimes not fun because it's you have this belief, like you're really hopeful this parent will change, and they're not going to. So having those discussions are not fun. Like those are really hard. And it just gives them that sense of autonomy to make decisions about relationships in the future.
Yeah, and to own their feelings based on their experience with that parent. And I want to share that when my kids were in their adolescent age, we read together, me and my children, we read books that were titled Sticky Situations.
Mhm.
And there are a couple different sticky situation books based on age. And it really, you don't have to come up with anything or use your own examples. It's all right there. Like it just breaks down a sticky situation and you ask your child, so like, what would you do in this situation? To start giving them that ability to process their thoughts and their emotions and think about what would be, the best decision for them. And I have this motto, and I say, the best thing isn't always the right thing, and the right thing isn't always the best thing. Just do something.
Yep. Action.
One or
Imperfect
the other.
action.
Yes, yes. And I think that did help to some degree in developing their own way of assessing a situation and then coming up with their own answers. Because when you're not with them and they are with the other parent, you have to rely on their ability to assess the situation and respond,
Mhm.
whether it's the right or the best or a mistake or whatever. It's like you want to give your kids the tools to have that mindset and the ability to really identify what's happening. And it's hard. It's so freaking hard. And I want to go back to the gap. Let's talk about some of these gaps. Like, where have you seen or identified gaps, whether it's in the system, at school, in the community, in society, that need to be filled to help these children?
Yeah. I think, and it's interesting because clearly there's mental health gaps for our kids. And one of the big pieces of that, there's like a lot of systemic issues at play, right? Because there's actually not a lot of child therapists in the world, like people, and a lot of it is because they go into it wanting to work with kids, and then they work with parents, and then they no longer want to work with kids because they don't, right? It can be really disheartening if you're dealing with parents who aren't going to change or do this. So there needs to be some more education within like that systemic framework. This is how these things impact our kids. And how do you work with parents? How do you protect yourself as a therapist? Like I consult with other therapists and offer some trainings and things to other therapists on protecting yourself from these high conflict situations, because guess who's going to grieve a therapist? Right? It's this abusive personality, these high conflict personalities. That's who will grieve us. That's who will try and sue us. That's who try to scare us. And so when therapists have that and they don't feel like they know what to do, they just stop seeing kids. And then our kids are the ones that are negatively affected by that. So that's one piece, is supporting the mental health practitioners in a lot of different ways. That's a whole like episode right there. Like how
Yeah,
to,
really,
we know what
really.
therapists need.
Yeah, because you carry so much, you can't unhear what you hear. So,
Yeah.
yeah. And then when you come to that reality of these parents are not going to change. So, do you feel like you just can't do anything anymore? That must be, yeah, to sleep at night. And
So
then I'm sorry, and then if you have that abusive partner, for the person that you are actually helping, and they're becoming a stronger individual and they're building their boundaries and they have their confidence, and that is the opposite of what their abusive partner wants. So then it's
yes.
because of you. And yeah, I totally see the whole picture in what you're talking about right now. And I agree. I agree. Yes. Many coaches, counselors, mental health therapists. Yeah, we all need our own support system and all of that, because there's so much
Yeah.
that we hear and that it's hard not for it to penetrate to our heart. We are human and we are here to serve.
Yes. Yeah. And that if we don't know what's coming our way. So if I wish that I had a little bit more training in my graduate program, but I am that person that it's my personality to try and figure stuff out. But that isn't everybody.
Right.
And I'm comfortable in the ugly. I'm comfortable trying to figure things out and seeing like the underbelly of like our system and things. Like I'm okay with that, but a lot of people that does, it just hurts their heart, extreme burnout. I feel really privileged and grateful that I can do that. Like personality wise, I can really look at it and I feel like I can use my privilege to fight the good fight
Yeah.
in that way. But then again, looking systemically, our family court system is a disaster. Like that's putting it lightly. There's not a word to
I
use
know it very
for
well.
it.
Yeah.
And so that we need a whole overhaul, because like we just passed Cadence Law in Colorado, House Bill 1178. And it is to train all the peripheral people in the court system in domestic violence, child abuse, sexual abuse, coercive control, trauma. Like that's what it is for, so that like GALs and CFIs and PREs, all these people that are making decisions or helping make decisions are not trained in this.
Yeah, and probably never even sat down to talk to one parent or child to see the actual impact that it has and the whole
Yes.
dance and dynamics that screws
Yeah.
everybody up.
Yeah. So those things need to happen. But then there's this other piece, which we've talked about like little bits, just because it infiltrates every area, but financial abuse causes so much harm, and it's in 98% of all cases, financial abuse or economic abuse. And
Yes.
so victim parents don't have access to good legal help. They don't have access to attorneys that know the thing, that are going to fight for them. So, and there are some pro bono or low cost options, but then they don't have the time that you need for these cases.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because in legislation, and a lot of people don't know, I was one of them. I went to the county, I stood in line, I waited for social services to tell me where I could get help. I did not know back then that I could contact the state legislation to see, hey, what programs do you have available? What laws are in effect to protect? How can I learn what my rights are as a victim? And where can I find advocates? And how do I go about taking this law and applying it to me, that so I can navigate and I can get what I need in order to provide and protect for my children while I am, I don't want to say running for my safety, but making big changes for my safety? Where and how can we get this information in the schools, at the workplace, where
Yeah.
people have training or knowledge or exposure to it so they know? I think about in the lunchroom, you have the labor laws, you have these mandated things that tell you where to go to get the support. But when it comes down to safety, one of the biggest concerns, right? Oh, you have to share the child, and the child should only go to as a safest space, right? We're already saying that at the beginning of the show. So if that is indeed the case, why aren't there any things in your face or training that you are given, or knowledge that you're given to know where to go if you find yourself in that situation, to actually start navigating through to get what you need?
Yeah. It is so hard, because even if you think of like in my website or my community, we have a link to teach you how to clear your browsing history, because very often you can't even do a Google search if you are living with an unsafe person on getting help.
Yeah.
Because if they go in and they see your browsing history, or you get an email and they have access to your email, or they check your phone all the time, or whatever it might be, that control, then you are at risk. So then women don't search.
And
right?
what is your website? Where can they find that information?
Yes. Yeah. So it is www.risingbeyondpc.com. The company is Rising Beyond Power and Control. So yeah, I was going to say there's tons of great web resources, but we have to be aware of this. There's something called DuckDuckGo, which is a browsing platform that you can search things and it doesn't save your history. So DuckGo is a good option. But because there's such great options out there, it's so hard. So domesticshelters.org is this huge online resource hub. So you can type in your state, you can type in what you need, you can type, and resources will come up, like shelter resources, some legal resources, but again, those are just hard to find. So you have to be actively searching. What I think needs to happen is they're doing health class in high schools. It's required, right? You're going to learn all about your bodies and using protection when you're having sex, and you're going to learn those things.
Sixth grade, fifth and
right?
Sixth grade.
Oh my gosh, the growing and changing. My son just did growing and changing last year in fifth grade, but you're right. Like you do it in fifth grade, seventh grade, 10th grade is like typical. But they need to really start addressing relationship violence.
Yes.
They need to start addressing it early, because with my young teen and older teen clients, I see it already. So I see the coercive control in the text messages. I'll see they're in session with me and it's like text after text, or it doesn't have to be text. It can be on Snapchat or whatever, of where are you? Who are you with? Are you talking about me with your therapist? And so I actually love it when that comes into the room, because then we get to talk about it in the room as it's happening. But not all kids have a therapist that they get to have that conversation with in the room. And so we just need more education and information on it starting younger. And then, yes, I think all HR, human resources, all need training on offering support when there's domestic violence. So is it paid family leave? Do they need that? Do they need resources shared on their work email versus can they use their work email to get these resources and not use their home email? Can they use their work phone to talk to a shelter rather than their cell phone? Are there different things that they can do within, the business or wherever you're working that can help them get help?
You are hitting on so many things right now that I'm like, I want to say a couple of things here. So
yes.
For teenagers, there is a organization. It's called loveisrespect.org.
Yes, it's a good one.
Love is respect. It is great. You have surveys that you can take, assessments that you can take to see where you are. There's a power and control wheel. There's a lot of education there. Now, aside of that, I interviewed 2 young ladies that developed an app for teenagers. It is a Safe Space is what it's called. It is in its launching phase right now. And when you open it up, it appears to be like a game, but it's for you to utilize. If you are next to the person, they won't even know that's what you're doing. I haven't had the opportunity to be a beta tester yet because it's in its launch phase, so that's coming. But I am super excited to see all of the options that are in there so I can talk about it more clearly and directly. But it is on its way. And again, it's Safe Space app, and it is made for teenagers. And when you're talking about the workplace, this is where my passion starts to come in because, oh my gosh, confronting domestic violence, I shared the mission about helping relocate families early on. But our vision is to reach out to the federal level of OSHA, because see, OSHA has a mandatory requirement for workplace violence policy to be in place at most places of business. And number one, what good is a policy without a program? Number two, when people think about workplace violence, they're thinking about work, manager, subordinate to employees, etc. But research shows over 50% of workplace violence is domestic violence spillover. Over 70% of workplace homicide is domestic violence spillover.
Yes.
Yet, these EAP programs that are available through most corporations, employee assistance programs, EAPs, they have help if you're a gambler, if you're addicted to porn, if you have a little bit of a drinking problem. But when you are trying to go to work in a safe environment without putting everybody else at harm, you're just trying to be safe. Where's the help? Where's the help?
Yeah.
Where are those resources? I have been talking to risk management. I want to know, is that a workman's comp case? What do you do in that situation? Who's at fault? Or who's compensated? How do they have to take their PTO? Do they have to take all their vacation? Do they have to go on short-term disability? Do they have to go without any pay? Is FMLA even an option under those types
Right.
of circumstances? And if so, how are they supposed to get from point A to point B to continue working? Because usually their job is the only thing that they have stable in their life, the only thing that they have that they can rely on to live, to survive, to provide, to protect, to move from point A to point B. And it's just like the job expects you to show up
Yes.
regardless. So there's a huge gap. There's a huge gap. I want to go in front of Department of Labor and OSHA and say, we all need domestic violence to be incorporated into this workplace violence policy and mandate that a program spin from that policy. Because what good is a policy? You're only going to look at it after the fact. You don't have time to look at a
Right.
policy real time. And, you know, when you think about it, without something like that being in place, think about how many lives it's already impacting when that one person goes to work. How many people are they talking to? How many people are worried for that person? How much productivity is going down? How much time is being consumed by people trying to support other people? Because look, as a victim going to work, work was my safe place. That's where I wanted to go. I'll be the first one there and the last one to go because I didn't want to leave.
Yeah.
Okay, that's number one. As a manager, when I'm dealing with somebody that is in that situation and knowing that the company doesn't have anything to offer, I take that on and I try to coach and help and give ideas or suggestions on a path of self-discovery. I cannot tell somebody what to do or give any type of direction. They have to figure out what's best for them and sometimes their children in that situation. As a first responder, and I'm not talking about a police officer or or a paramedic, a first responder in the realm of security officers, security guards are first responders in any situation before the authorities get there. Are they being trained? Hell to the they're
No.
not.
Nope.
They're not. And it's okay. So then as HR, right? I have plenty of friends in the HR realm. What do you do? What do they do? And it's like, what can they do? If there's no resources available, what do they have to offer? How do they coach? How do they make them feel that work is a safe place to come to and that they are supported? But yet, all these other programs are available to those that are coming in smelling like alcohol. Well, up all night because they're gambling all their money away and they have help.
Yeah. And I think a
Huge gap.
huge piece, as you were talking, is all of the things that make this still not talked about is that it has been seen as not a big problem. Like people don't understand the level. And then this is a personal problem. Like it's in the home,
So is
right? It's
drinking,
like
so is
behind
gambling, so is
closed
porn.
doors. And that like lack of willingness to talk about it increases the shame of everyone going through it because they know it's not okay to talk about. And so when they are feeling extreme amounts of shame, they're not going to reach out for help until it's too late or it's so far gone that they can't, right there. It's like the cleanup and triage rather than
Right.
how can we prevent?
And how is that stigma still out there in today's society with everything that's out there in your face? Everything, the mental health, the emotional intelligence, all these things that make you a better person. How is domestic violence still this shameful, quiet, and the statistics are extremely high? So you look around and good and damn well, you can talk to any one of those people and there's going to be quite a few that'll be like, yep, either in it or had it or exposed to it or whatever,
Yeah.
or they know somebody if it wasn't them. And it's just like, how do we break that? Think about the Me Too movement. It was a big thing and then it fizzled out so fast. And it's
Yeah.
but what happened? You know,
Yeah.
I really want to bring this to the forefront and break that stigma. And with breaking that stigma, having resources available for people to tap into to get what they need. And I feel like that's just the hugest gap. And I don't want to derail too much of what the intent for this call was, but it's
There's
our kids are our future. And if we don't teach them, if we don't feed them emotional intelligence, if we don't feed them the opportunity to be able to assess situations for themselves and have that strength, that mental strength, we're not gonna give them the tools that they need in order to cope and make it through.
Yeah. And so again, it's like the gaps are so vast. And if you want to know my like Debbie Downer answer, like if I'm in a very pessimistic place, the answer of like, why is there still this misconception and stigma? And here's the like gross answer that I come to when I'm like, oh, I don't want to come to this answer, but the answer is that it's because it benefits people in
Ooh,
power.
it
Keeping
benefits people in power.
this quiet benefits people to some extent. So
I'm going politicians, I'm thinking government, I'm thinking funding, I'm thinking.
yeah. So it's everyone's like, why is our family court system so crazy? Why? And it's like money.
Wow.
So follow the money, follow the power, follow these things. And so if putting this out in the forefront and really dispelling the misconceptions that it's not just the young, uneducated in Colorado, like young, uneducated white woman living in a trailer with 6 kids, kid on her hip, husband is blue collar, comes home, drinks, and beats her. That's what it looks like. And that's not what it looks like at all. Is there that? Sure. But it is in every demographic, every race, it doesn't discriminate.
Oh yeah, you're right. Absolutely. Yeah.
And so if there are people in power that have power and control over lots of people, right? So I think that this myth and misconception has some benefits for certain people. And it's so gross. So gross. And I think that it does. And so it's like this constant fight for basic human rights just keeps us busy fighting for basic human rights as far as we get.
And we need more than basic.
Yeah.
And you know what? You're hitting the nail on the head. How can we create domestic violence under human rights?
Yeah, so there is something super positive, and I don't want to speak a lot about it because I don't know enough about it, but the UN is taking on investigations of our family court system, and specifically how the term or the strategy, I'll call it strategy, parental alienation in court, how that is harming and is a human rights issue.
I love it.
In their next meeting, whenever that is something that the UN, that's a big deal, that they are starting to address and look at. And it's because there's been media coverage recently, because it's been out there more. People are more aware. And some of that is our kids and social media, right? Like social media there's goods and bads and all the thing. But our kids are getting on social media who have gone through this, who have been sent to reunification camps, who have been sent to live with their abuser, who have done that. And they are making TikToks and reels and doing lives of their experience, which is so heartbreaking to some extent, right? Like that our kids have to take this role, like they have to do this for us, but it's also really empowering. So when our kids are at the Senate and they are testifying about these things, I am sure it is petrifying to share their experience to all these lawmakers. Yeah. And yet the amount of empowerment that they have, this type of audience listening, that is something we haven't seen before that we are seeing right now. And I think that is a little bit more of a catalyst of change than me just being this professional being like, I need to make change. These are our kids, and it's hard, right? Like they can listen and nod to me and be like, okay, Sybil, but you're sitting in front of this group of 8 young teens who have been sent to live with their abuser.
Yeah. Listen,
they're talking about it.
Yeah, yeah. I just spoke to a young man yesterday, getting ready to graduate high school. He learned about the nonprofit and he said, I was in third grade and lost my best friend because his dad killed him. Nasty divorce.
Yep.
Third grade. And now he wants to, we're gonna touch base again next week and hopefully he will be joining the nonprofit and supporting it in whatever capacity he wants to and is interested in. And I will have him here as a guest as well and talk about that because you're absolutely right. We said it earlier, the children are our future and they have this social media that gives them the voice and gives them the platform. And yes, they are making waves and making changes. And I agree with you. I'm thinking that maybe high school and college is the place to really start honing in and talking about these things because earlier it's just not the right time, but because they're at that age where they have the ability and that voice and they can go and be heard and they are of that age to sign up without having parental consent and all that. And maybe that's the key here because the Violence Against Women's Act, they have colleges need to have a piece of that incorporated into their campus violence policy. So they are already protected and have particular rights. Not a lot of students even know that exists. I have interviewed college students that live on campus and they don't even know that it exists. They're sitting here telling me, oh yeah, we call the number for security and hope that they show up. And then we're escorted here and there. And it's just like, why aren't they teaching this? Going back to, again, hey, if you find yourself in this situation right here on the whatever, the whiteboard, the blackboard, the bulletin board, online board, whatever it is, here's all the resources for everything you may need if you find yourself in this situation. But they keep it quiet when it's a need.
Yeah. And it again, that secrecy just feeds the shame and they aren't going to talk about it. And they've heard it in their family, or maybe not directly heard it, right, overtly, but they know that they should keep this secret.
And it shouldn't be. There's a community out here that wants to help, that has been through it, that has either resources or personal resources, outside resources. We all have been through something. And if we haven't been through something, we know somebody who has. And we, at the end of the day, when we get out of that situation and we got wiser and stronger, we want to help because it is the worst knowing that you feel alone.
Yeah. And you're not alone. Unfortunately, like I wish that there were just like these handful of cases and these were like rare circumstances, but 1 in 3.
Yeah.
And anytime you've heard, oh, these people at work or my friends are going through a high conflict divorce, that's abuse.
Yes.
There's abuse present. There's coercive control present.
In some capacity.
And so these terms, and you hear high conflict divorce all the time. Oh, they're in such a nasty divorce, or it's really high conflict, or whatever it is. Like that language should be like, oh, abuse.
Equals. Yes.
Abuse. As you hear it, that's actually what it means. And so you're not alone. And there are those of us that are squeaky wheels, like we're loudmouths and we're going to try and spread the word. And so that's why collaboration between those of us in the space is so important, because we can find ourselves working in a silo and feel like we can't get anywhere. But if I'm working with people all over the United States, and actually like in the UK and in Malaysia, I have some contacts in Malaysia and in Australia and all these places, that is really helpful to the overall change. Because if it, like, hallelujah for Colorado, that's where I am from and am right now. And we have this new legislation that just passed in just Colorado. Whether you live next door in Wyoming or you live next door in Utah, you don't have the same legislation in your state. And so can the other states learn from, like, Colorado? How did you pass it? What was that? Is it working? How can we change it? So it's like learning from everyone and connecting, not just in these silos of I'm working right here in Colorado. These are my people. That's my focus. Because overall change is going to take people from all over. And so that's why our connection is really helpful, because we shouldn't be connected. Like, why would we ever be connected? It's because we're reaching out, we're trying to find these connections, because this isn't a small problem. This is an all over issue.
My gosh, you're giving me the chills. I have the goosebumps because yes, it's about filling these gaps. We're identifying where gaps are present, how it's impacting us as parents and children. And we just have this desire and passion to try to fill those gaps to give a second chance to better the future and to mitigate this ongoing vicious cycle that I can't express in words how it just infuriates me that we are in 2023 and we are still talking about human rights under domestic violence when, I mean, so much has been done. And it's still, regardless of how much has been done, we're still in this, the stigma, the shameness, the secrecy, and the impact that it has. And we can keep going all day in this.
And I really can. As you were talking, I was like, and we need to be connected because we can't do it all. Ooh. I'm not most likely going to do a lot with HR because I'm a child therapist and this is my zone of genius. This is where I need to be, is helping people directly, training other mental health therapists so that they know what they're looking at so they can help, right? Like we each are going to have our own drops in the bucket so that the bucket can be filled.
And if that's the balance, if I'm working with HR, if I'm working with corporate America, if I'm working with OSHA to get these programs, these policies turned into programs, including domestic violence, because I think about, again, going back to teenagers, right? When they get their first job, 15 with a work permit, 16 legally speaking, their job, most of the time, when I'm talking to many people, work and school is their safe place to go, to get away. And they should have these programs available or resources that are put in your face so you can access them. Yeah. It's time for them. It's time for corporations to step up and provide that type of information and resources. If they're doing it for these other circumstances, porn addicts, gamblers, alcoholics, they should have it for people who just want to be safe.
We're not like asking for the moon here.
No, not at all.
We're asking for safety.
That's it.
That's like, we would like some calm and peace and safety. That's all. We're not asking for these huge things that are like out of reach. We're asking for basic human rights.
Correct. And I just really want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, A, for being here, and B, for giving our children what they need. You are one in a million that have stood by the children, that have not exited out because you want to work with the parents or because it's too much for you to handle. You have the skin, the tenacity, the strength, the mental ability, the endurance, oh my gosh, I can keep going on and on, to stay giving our children what they need to give them that mental and emotional balanced well-being, which is so hard. It is so hard. And I'm just so blessed to have met you, to have connected with you. We're going to stay in touch forever because we're going to fill these gaps together where I'm seeing you're working. If I can do on the other side, and we just create this full circle, because I recognize that's what it takes. You can't just have the dark without the light. You can't just have it's impossible. It has to be a full balance. And in order for it to be whole, it needs to work on all components, parents and children.
Oh, I appreciate the kind words, right? Make me smile. I have to receive some positive words.
Absolutely.
But I agree
advocates are hard to come by. Like you said, legislation is the route to start, not social services in a long line, but we don't know that. And advocacy is a great thing, but finding advocates is really hard. And when you do, like you said, do they have the bandwidth to take on another client?
Yeah.
And does that advocate know the ins and outs of the legislative laws, programs, and rights that are available for those victims, for those people, for those children? And it's not easy. I made over 1,000 phone calls before I came across the advocate. And the advocate that I came across was not one that I called. It was somebody else that called somebody else, because I was so persistent and I didn't stop. It was more than 8 months of nonstop calls every single day of my life while I was at work,
Yep. Because you were safe there.
because I was safe there and I could do it. Was that useful time for me to be there? If I was the manager, there would probably be a problem, but I was discreet. I didn't bring the drama. I was quiet, but I took care of my business.
Yeah.
Or I was trying to take care of my business, but it was life or death. And when we're put in that situation and we have to find our way out, do not give up. Do not give up, because you will find the help that you need. And when you do, you'll see the passion behind those that are willing to help.
And that you are worth it enough to continue the calls.
That's right. That's right. Oh my gosh. We have so much work to do.
We do. And yet I always like knowing that I don't even remember where I heard this, but it was like the difference between being a guru and being a contributor.
Ooh.
And when you're being a guru, you have to know everything and be able to do everything and hold on to everything. That's just like a lot of responsibility. If I'm a contributor, I get to do my piece and my part and trust that others are doing theirs, and it feels doable, right? It's, I get to contribute what I do and my knowledge and my passion here, but I don't have to do it all.
Correct.
And I think that shift is really important because we can't do it all. Yeah, if you have passion, a skill, or whatever, you can be a contributor. You don't have to do it all.
That's right. That's right. So with that being said, they can find you on risingbeyondpc.com.
Yep.
And let anybody who has the heart, the desire, the passion, the mission, the love, all of that, that's where you can find her for your contributions. Contribute whatever it is that you deem warranted. Seriously. And confrontingdomesticviolence.org as well. Any contributing events, planning, support, anything, the more the merrier. It's building the community so that we have resources to provide when clients come our way and need real-time help. That's what it's about.
Yeah. And it may even be like when you think of contributing, it may not be financially or with skill. It may be you hear somebody talking about their nasty divorce and you share a resource.
That's right.
That's it. So it doesn't have to feel this overwhelming thing. You can contribute in all sorts of ways.
I love it. I love it. Sybil, thank you so much for being here today. Your wisdom speaks volume. Your passion in helping these children is our future. And I cannot thank you enough. I wish I met you years ago, because I would have definitely been in one of those seats, or not me, but my kids.
Well,
they would have definitely been in your seat.
I appreciate you, again, having a space for people to share their passions for this.
Oh, yes. Thank you so much. risingbeyondpc.com. Thank you, Sybil.
Thank you.
Confronting Domestic Violence is a 501c3. All contributions, volunteers, and sponsorships are welcomed. It takes a community to make a difference. Nobody should suffer alone. Please scan the QR code.